Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my channel, A Quiet Terror. Today, I will tell you new stories again that you can listen to before going to bed to relax and fall asleep easily. So, lie back and don't forget to like and subscribe before you fall asleep, and we'll get started. The Whispering Hollow, a tale of shadows and secrets. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The night was a living thing, pressing against the windows of Eleanor Grayson's battered sedan as she navigated the winding, fog-draped roads of northern Vermont. The dashboard clock glowed a faint 11:47 p.m., its numbers flickering like dying heartbeat. The radio had long since given up, spitting nothing but static into the silence, and the headlights barely pierced the thick, rolling mist that clung to the earth like a shroud. She'd been driving for hours, too many hours, her eyes burning with fatigue, her hands cramped around the steering wheel. She was bound for Montreal, chasing a job interview that promised a fresh start after the wreckage of her divorce. But the gas needle hovered dangerously close to empty, and her phone screen stared back at her, useless, with no bars. It was then, as the road twisted through a skeletal forest of bare, claw-like trees, that the sign emerged from the fog like a specter. Welcome to Hollow's End. Population 312. The letters were faded, peeling, and the wood was warped, as if the sign itself wanted to retreat from the place it marked. Hollow's End wasn't on her map, digital or paper, and she hadn't seen a single road sign for miles. Yet there it was, a forgotten speck of civilization crouched in the gloom, its crooked rooftops and dim streetlights barely visible through the haze. Eleanor hesitated, her foot easing off the gas. She could push on, risk running dry in the middle of nowhere, or stop here. The rational part of her mind screamed to keep going, but exhaustion won. She turned the wheel and rolled into the town. The first building she saw was a gas station, a relic of another era with a single rusted pump and a neon sign that buzzed and flickered, spelling out gas in jagged, uneven letters. The sound was like a trapped fly, incessant and maddening. Eleanor pulled up, the gravel crunching under her tires, and stepped out into the cold. The air smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like old blood. She shivered, pulling her coat tighter, and approached the pump. No card reader, no instructions, just a nozzle dangling from its cradle like a limp hand. Before she could puzzle it out, the station door creaked open, and an old man shuffled out. He was tall and gaunt, his face a map of deep lines and shadows, his eyes sunken into dark hollows. His overalls hung loosely on his frame, stained with grease and time, and his hands trembled slightly as he took the nozzle from her. "Fill it," he rasped, his voice like gravel grinding underfoot. Eleanor nodded, too tired to argue, and handed him a crumpled 20. He worked in silence, the only sound the gurgle of gas and that incessant buzzing overhead. When he finished, he capped the tank and turned those hollow eyes on her. "Where you headed?" "Montreal," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Just passing through. Is there a place to stay nearby? I need a few hours' rest." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at her, his gaze heavy and unblinking, as if weighing her soul. Then he pointed a bony finger down the road, toward the heart of the town. "Mabel's Inn. Only place open this late. Mind the quiet, though. Folks here don't take kindly to noise after dark." His words hung in the air, strange and ominous, and Eleanor felt a prickle of unease crawl up her spine. She muttered a thanks, climbed back into her car, and drove off, the old man's silhouette fading into the fog in her rearview mirror. Mabel's Inn loomed at the edge of Hollow's End, a sagging, two-story structure that looked like it had been abandoned by time. The paint was peeling in long, curling strips, exposing the weathered wood beneath, and the windows stared out like hollow eyes, dark and uninviting. A faded sign swung lazily in the breeze, creaking on rusted hinges. Mabel's Inn, rooms by the night. Eleanor parked in the empty lot, her headlights sweeping across the building, and grabbed her suitcase from the trunk. The fog seemed thicker here, curling around her ankles like a living thing as she climbed the steps to the porch. Inside, the lobby was a tomb of mildew and dust. The air was heavy, oppressive, and the faint scent of old wood and something sour lingered. A single lamp flickered on the counter, casting long, wavering shadows across the walls, which were lined with faded floral wallpaper peeling at the edges. Behind the counter sat a woman, presumably Mabel, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, her hands busy with a pair of knitting needles. She didn't look up as Eleanor approached, just kept clicking those needles together, the sound sharp and rhythmic in the stillness. "Room for the night?" Eleanor said, setting her suitcase down. Her voice felt too loud, too alive in this dead place. Mabel's eyes flicked up briefly, cold and gray as the fog outside. She slid a brass key across the counter, its surface scratched and dull. "Room 7. No calls after midnight. And don't open the window." Her tone was flat, mechanical, as if she'd said it 1,000 times before. Eleanor frowned, the odd instructions nagging at her, but she was too exhausted to question them. She took the key, its weight cold in her hand, and headed upstairs, the stairs groaning under her feet like they might collapse. Room 7 was at the end of a narrow hallway, its door slightly ajar as if waiting for her. The room itself was small and sparse, a lumpy bed with a threadbare quilt, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling. The wallpaper here was the same faded floral pattern as downstairs, but it was stained with dark, irregular patches that looked disturbingly like handprints. Eleanor locked the door behind her, the click echoing in the silence, and kicked off her shoes. She didn't bother unpacking, just dropped her suitcase by the bed and collapsed onto the mattress. It smelled faintly of mothballs and despair. As her eyes fluttered shut, lulled by the weight of exhaustion, she heard it, a faint, rustling whisper, like wind stirring dry leaves. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, seeping through the cracks and curling around her. She sat up, heart thudding in her chest, and scanned the room. Nothing moved. The bulb buzzed faintly overhead, casting its weak light across the empty space. The whisper stopped, leaving only the sound of her own breathing. Just the wind, she told herself, lying back down. Just the wind. But as sleep pulled her under, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching. Chapter 2. The first night's sleep came in jagged fragments, a restless dance between exhaustion and unease. Eleanor dreamed of endless gray corridors stretching into darkness, their walls slick with moisture and pulsing faintly, as if alive. Voices echoed through the dream, distant, pleading, overlapping in a chorus of despair she couldn't understand. She ran through the corridors, her footsteps silent, her breath fogging in the cold. but the voices followed, growing louder, closer, until they were inside her skull. She woke with a start, her shirt damp with sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs. The room was dark, the bulb extinguished, and the only light came from the sickly yellow glow of the street lamp outside, seeping through the grimy window. The clock on the nightstand blinked 3:14 a.m., its red digits stark against the gloom. She lay still, listening, trying to separate reality from the fading threads of her nightmare. Then she heard it, scratching, soft and insistent, like nails dragging across wood. It came from the window. Eleanor's breath caught, her body tensing beneath the quilt. She remembered Mabel's warning, "Don't open the window," but curiosity gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate, as if something wanted her attention. She slid out of bed, her bare feet cold against the warped floorboards, and crept toward the window. The glass was streaked with dirt, distorting the world outside, but she pressed her face close, peering into the night. The street below was empty, swallowed by fog so thick it seemed to breathe, swirling and shifting like a living entity. The street lamp's light barely reached beyond its own post, illuminating a small circle of cracked pavement and nothing else. But there, on the edge of that light, something moved. A shadow, tall and impossibly thin, swayed like a reed caught in a breeze. It didn't walk, it drifted, its edges blurring into the mist, as if it were made of the fog itself. Eleanor's pulse quickened as it turned toward her, revealing no face, just a void, a black emptiness where eyes and mouth should have been. The scratching intensified, a frantic rhythm now, and she stumbled back, her hip slamming into the nightstand. The shadow lingered, its faceless gaze fixed on her window, and she pressed herself against the far wall, her hands trembling. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it melted into the fog, leaving the street empty once more. The scratching stopped, replaced by that whispering again, louder, clearer, threading through the room like a chorus of lost souls. It wasn't just noise now, it carried weight, emotion, grief, anger, longing. Eleanor clutched the quilt to her chest, her rational mind scrambling for answers. A trick of the light, she thought. Exhaustion playing games with her senses. But her gut screamed otherwise, a primal instinct that refused to be silenced. Something was wrong with this place, something ancient, something hungry. She crawled back into bed, pulling the covers over her head like a child hiding from the dark, and waited for morning. Sleep eluded her, chased away by the whispers that lingered just beyond her understanding. Dawn arrived gray and heavy, the fog refusing to lift. Eleanor dressed quickly, her movements stiff and mechanical, and headed downstairs. The lobby was as lifeless as the night before, the air thick with that same sour smell. Mabel was behind the counter again, knitting with those relentless needles, her face expressionless. She slid a tray of weak coffee and stale toast across to Eleanor without a word. "Sleep well?" she asked, finally, her voice flat, her eyes darting to the window, as if expecting something to emerge from the mist. Eleanor hesitated, the shadow and whispers flashing through her mind. "Fine, thanks," she lied, forcing a smile. She didn't want to talk about it, not with Mabel, not with anyone here. She just wanted to leave. But when she reached her car, the engine sputtered once, twice, then died with a pathetic wheeze. She turned the key again, her stomach sinking as the dashboard lights flickered and faded. dead battery. She slammed her hands against the wheel, cursing under her breath. She'd have to wait for a mechanic. Back inside, Mabel didn't look surprised. "You'll be here till dusk at least," she said, her needles clicking steadily. "Jed's the only one who fixes cars, and he's out till then. Won't find him before." Eleanor nodded, resigned, her plans unraveling like thread. She spent the day wandering Hollow's End, hoping to shake the unease that clung to her like damp clothes. The town was a graveyard of silence, its streets empty, its buildings leaning inward as if trying to collapse into themselves. The few locals she passed avoided her gaze, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes shadowed with something she couldn't name. And everywhere she went, that faint whispering followed, threading through the air like a secret she wasn't meant to hear. Chapter 3. The Hollow's Secret. By afternoon, Eleanor's unease had hardened into a cold, gnawing dread. She couldn't sit still, couldn't wait passively for Jed to rescue her from this suffocating town. She found herself at Grady's place, a diner on the edge of Hollow's End, its sign barely legible through the grime. The interior was dim, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs that buzzed like dying insects. A handful of patrons sat scattered across the booths, their heads bowed over plates of gray, unappetizing food. The air smelled of grease and despair, and the silence was broken only by the clink of a spoon against a chipped mug. Eleanor slid into a booth by the window, the vinyl seat cracking under her weight, and ordered coffee from a waitress who didn't smile. The other patrons stared as she entered, their conversations dying mid-sentence, their eyes tracking her like wary animals. She ignored them, focusing on the fog outside, its tendrils pressing against the glass as if trying to get in. But one figure caught her attention, an old woman in a corner booth, her hands trembling as she clutched a rosary. Her face was a web of wrinkles, her eyes wide and watery, and she muttered to herself, her lips moving in a rhythm that matched the whispers Eleanor couldn't escape. Desperate for something normal, something human, Eleanor approached her. "Excuse me," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from the woman. "I'm just passing through. What's with this place? It feels off." The woman's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto Eleanor's with a mixture of fear and pity. She leaned closer, her voice a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the hum of the diner. "You shouldn't have come. They don't like strangers. Not after what happened." "What happened?" Eleanor pressed, her pulse quickening. She leaned in, the table cold against her elbows, her coffee forgotten. The woman glanced around, her fingers tightening on the rosary as if it could protect her. Then she spoke, fast and low, as if afraid to be overheard. "Years ago, this was a mining town, prosperous, thriving. Folks came from all over to work the shafts, pulling coal and iron from the earth. It was good for a while. Money flowed, houses went up, kids played in the streets. Then they dug too deep. Found something they shouldn't have. A chamber older than the mountains, older than anything human. The miners said it hummed like a heartbeat, and the air down there was wrong, thick, cold, alive. They broke into it, and that's when they saw them, shadows that moved on their own, tall and thin, with no faces. And the voices, promises, threats, things no man should hear." Eleanor's mouth went dry, her hands clenching into fists. "What did they do?" "Tried to seal it," the woman said, her voice trembling. "Dynamite, concrete, prayers, everything they could think of. But it was too late. Whatever they woke, it didn't go back. It spread, slow at first, taking the miners one by one. They'd vanish into the shafts, and all we'd find were their tools, covered in frost, even in summer. Then it came up here, into the town. Took the loud ones first, the talkers, the fighters, the ones who wouldn't stay quiet. Hollowed us out till we were just this. What's left? Trapped, feeding it silence, so it doesn't take us too. Feeding it silence, Eleanor echoed, her voice barely a whisper. The woman's eyes darted to the window, then back to Eleanor. No noise after dark. No screams, no running, no fighting. It hears you, it finds you. That's why we stay quiet. That's why we stay. You hear the whispers, don't you? They're calling, always calling. If you answer, you're gone. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, and shuffled away, muttering prayers under her breath, leaving Eleanor alone with her racing thoughts. The diner felt smaller now, the walls closing in. Eleanor paid for her coffee and stepped outside, the fog wrapping around her like a cold embrace. The old woman's story gnawed at her, a puzzle with too many missing pieces, shadows that moved, voices that promised, a town trapped by its own fear. She wanted to dismiss it as superstition, the ramblings of a broken mind, but the whispers followed her, louder now, weaving through the mist. She hurried back to the inn, her footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty streets. Jed arrived at dusk, a wiry man with haunted eyes and grease-stained hands. He worked on her car in silence, his tools clinking faintly as the sky darkened. When he finished, he handed her the keys, his voice low and urgent. "Leave before midnight. Don't look back." His words mirrored the old woman's warning, and Eleanor felt the weight of something ancient, something relentless, pressing down on her. She thanked him, her voice shaking, and ran upstairs to pack. The whispers grew as she stuffed clothes into her suitcase, a chorus of voices she couldn't ignore. She had to get out of Hollow's End before whatever lurked in the fog claimed her too. Chapter 4. The Escape. The clock in room 7 struck 11 p.m. as Eleanor tore out of the inn, her suitcase banging against her legs. The fog was a wall now, impenetrable, swallowing the town behind her as she threw her bag into the back seat and jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, thank God for Jed, and she peeled out of the lot, gravel spitting under her tires. The road stretched ahead, a narrow ribbon of asphalt vanishing into the mist, and she floored the gas, her hands trembling on the wheel. The town shrank in her rearview mirror, its crooked rooftops and flickering lights fading into the gloom. She didn't care about Montreal anymore, didn't care about the job or the fresh start. She just wanted out, away from the whispers, the shadows, the suffocating silence of Hollow's End. The fog thickened, curling around the car like fingers, its tendrils slipping through the cracks in the windows, despite her efforts to seal them. The whispering grew louder, no longer a background hum, but a cacophony of voices, angry, pleading, hungry. They pressed against her eardrums, filling the car with their weight. "Stay," they hissed, the word clear now, sharp as a blade. "Join us. Be quiet." Eleanor shook her head, tears stinging her eyes, and pushed the car faster. The speedometer climbed, 50, 60, 70. Dangerous on these twisting roads, but she didn't care. Shadows flickered in her peripheral vision, tall and thin, swaying just beyond the headlights' reach. She refused to look, refused to give them form, but they were there, pacing her, their presence a cold weight on her chest. Then the car stalled. The engine coughed once, twice, and fell silent, the dashboard lights winking out like dying stars. She was miles from Hollow's End, surrounded by endless trees and fog, the road stretching into nothingness. Panic clawed at her throat as she turned the key again and again, the click of the ignition mocking her. Nothing. The whispering swelled, pressing against the windows, and she saw them, dozens of shadows, faceless and swaying, emerging from the mist like specters summoned from a nightmare. They didn't rush her. They waited, patient as predators, their voids of faces turned toward her. Eleanor locked the doors, her breath shallow, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. The shadows drew closer, their whispers forming a chorus now. "Stay. Join us. Be quiet." She clamped her hands over her ears, but the voices burrowed deeper into her skull, into her bones. The air grew cold, the windows frosting over with intricate spiraling patterns. And she realized, with sickening clarity, that they weren't outside anymore. They were inside, their shapes bleeding through the seats, the dashboard, the air itself, their edges dissolving into tendrils that reached for her. She screamed, a raw, desperate sound that shattered the silence they demanded, and the shadows surged. The car shook, glass cracking under invisible hands as they enveloped her. Their coldness seeped into her skin, her lungs, her mind, pulling her down into a void of whispers and darkness. Then, silence. The fog lifted, revealing an empty road, an empty car, keys still dangling in the ignition. Eleanor Grayson was gone, another offering to the thing that Hollow's End fed with its silence. The whispers faded into the night, patient, waiting for the next weary soul to stumble into its grasp. Epilogue. The next visitor. 2 weeks later, a young man named Carter roared into Hollow's End on a sputtering motorcycle, its engine coughing on its last fumes. The fog greeted him like an old friend, curling around his boots as he rolled to a stop at the gas station. The old attendant emerged, his sunken eyes glinting in the neon light, and filled the tank without a word. When Carter asked about a place to crash, the man pointed down the road. "Mabel's Inn. Only place open this late. Mind the quiet?" Carter shrugged, unfazed, and rode off, the buzz of his bike swallowed by the mist. At the inn, Mabel slid him the key to room 7, her needles clicking in the stillness. "No calls after midnight. Don't open the window." He grinned, tossing the key in his hand, and climbed the stairs. The room was as Eleanor had left it, lumpy bed, cracked mirror, faint stains on the walls. He dropped his helmet by the door and flopped onto the mattress, the springs groaning under his weight. As he drifted toward sleep, the whispers began, soft and rustling, threading through the walls. Carter stirred, frowning but didn't wake. Outside, the fog thickened, and a shadow swayed in the street lamp's glow, its faceless gaze fixed on room 7. The cycle began again, patient and inevitable, as Hollow's End waited to claim another voice for its silence. Chapter 1. The Storm's Invitation. The rain lashed against the windshield of Daniel Harrow's pickup truck as he drove along the jagged cliffs of Maine's northern coast. It was past midnight, the kind of hour where the world feels abandoned, and the storm had turned the night into a chaos of wind and water. The clock on the dashboard read 12:23 a.m. its green glow the only light besides the weak beams of his headlights, struggling against the deluge. He'd been on the road for days, fleeing a life in Boston that had crumbled under debt and regret, heading nowhere in particular, just away. The gas tank was nearly empty, and his phone had died hours ago, leaving him alone with the roar of the tempest. The coastal road twisted like a serpent, flanked by sheer drops into the churning Atlantic on one side and looming pines on the other. Daniel's hands ached from gripping the wheel, his eyes straining to see through the sheets of rain, when a sign flickered into view. Wraithmere, 3 miles. He hadn't planned to stop, hadn't even heard of Wraithmere, but the truck sputtered, a warning cough from the engine, and he knew he had no choice. 3 miles later, the village emerged from the storm like a ghost ship breaking the waves. A cluster of weathered cottages, a steepled church, and a single pier jutting into the Black Sea, all bathed in the faint, swaying light of a lantern atop a cliffside tower. He pulled into a gravel lot beside a squat building with a sign reading Tide's Rest Tavern. The windows glowed dimly, a beacon in the dark, and Daniel grabbed his duffel bag, bracing himself against the storm as he dashed inside. The tavern was warm but stifling, smelling of salt and wet wood. A handful of locals hunched over their drinks, their faces carved with lines of exhaustion, their eyes darting to him and away. The bartender, a broad man with a gray beard and a scar across his cheek, nodded as Daniel approached. "Lost?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Just need a room," Daniel said, shaking water from his coat. "And gas if you've got it. Room's upstairs. Gas in the morning. Storm's got the pumps shut down." The bartender slid a key across the counter, its edges worn smooth. "Number 4. Keep the curtains drawn. Sea's restless tonight." Daniel frowned at the odd advice, but nodded, too weary to question it. He paid with damp bills and climbed the creaking stairs, the sound of the storm muffled by the thick walls. Room 4 was small and damp, with a sagging bed, a chipped dresser, and a single window overlooking the pier. The curtains were heavy, moth-eaten, and Daniel left them open, peering out at the lantern tower. Its light swung in slow arcs, cutting through the rain, and he thought he saw something, a shape, fleeting and dark, moving along the pier. He blinked, and it was gone. Exhaustion pulled at him, and he collapsed onto the bed, the mattress groaning under his weight. As he drifted toward sleep, a sound crept into the room, a low, rhythmic hum, like the sea itself was singing, deep and mournful. He told himself it was the storm, nothing more, and let darkness take him. Chapter 2. The Village's Gaze. Daniel woke to silence. The storm reduced to a drizzle tapping against the window. The room was cold, the air heavy with the scent of brine, and the clock on the dresser showed 6:47 a.m., its hands frozen as if time had stalled. He rubbed his eyes, the hum from the night before echoing in his memory, and dressed quickly. Downstairs, the tavern was empty, save for the bartender, who was wiping down the counter with a rag that looked older than the building itself. "Storm's past," the man said without looking up. "Gas is out back. Amos'll help you. Don't wander too far. Folks here don't take to strangers gawking." Daniel nodded, grabbing his keys, and stepped outside. The village of Wraithmere lay before him, gray and sodden under a sky the color of slate. The cottages were hunched against the wind, their shingles warped and green with moss, and the church steeple loomed over the square, its cross tilted as if bowing to the sea. The lantern tower stood apart, perched on the cliff's edge, its glass dome dark now, the light extinguished. Amos, a wiry old man with a limp and a perpetual scowl, filled Daniel's tank in silence, his hands trembling as he worked. When Daniel asked about the tower, Amos froze, his eyes narrowing. "Lantern Keeper's place. Don't go up there. Ain't for outsiders." His tone was sharp, final, and he shuffled away before Daniel could press further. Unease settled in his gut, but he brushed it off. He'd get gas, eat, and leave Wraithmere behind by noon. The tavern served a meager breakfast, oily fish and stale bread, and Daniel ate alone, the locals' eyes boring into him from across the room. Their stares were heavy, assessing, and he felt like prey under a hawk's gaze. He finished quickly and stepped outside, intending to head back to his truck, but curiosity tugged at him. The lantern tower pulled his gaze, its silhouette stark against the gray sky, and he found himself walking toward it, the cobblestone path slick under his boots. The village watched him go. Curtains twitched in windows, shadows shifted behind glass, and a child, a pale girl with hollow eyes, stared from a doorway before her mother yanked her inside. The air grew colder as he neared the cliff. The sea's roar louder, and that hum returned, faint but insistent, vibrating through the ground. The tower was ancient, its stones blackened by centuries of salt and storm, and a rusted gate barred the path to its door. A plaque, barely legible, was bolted to the gate. Erected 1692, the keeper's watch. Endures. Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing the cold metal, when a voice barked behind him. "Get away from there!" He turned to see a woman, middle-aged, wiry, with wild hair, and a face like weathered driftwood glaring at him. She clutched a broom like a weapon, her knuckles white. "You don't belong here. Go back to your truck and leave. I was just looking," Daniel said, raising his hands. "What's the big deal?" Her eyes flicked to the tower, then back to him, fear flashing in their depths. "The big deal," she hissed, "is you don't know what you're stirring. Get gone before dark. You won't like what comes with the tide." She turned and marched away, leaving him alone with the hum and the sea's restless murmur. Daniel lingered, the warning gnawing at him, but he shook it off. He'd leave soon, just not yet. Chapter 3. The Keeper's Tale. Back at the tavern, Daniel couldn't shake the woman's words or the hum, which followed him like a shadow. He needed answers. The bartender was alone, polishing glasses with that same ancient rag, and Daniel took a chance. "What's with the tower?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Everyone's acting like it's cursed." The bartender's hand stilled, his scar twitching as he set the glass down. He leaned closer, his voice low, conspiratorial, not cursed, bound. "You want the story, outsider? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." He poured himself a shot of amber liquid, downed it, and began. Wraithmere wasn't always like this, quiet, half-dead. 300 years ago, it was a fishing village, thriving on cod and crab. Ships came and went, nets always full. Then the storms started, unnatural ones, tearing boats apart, drowning men by the dozen. No warning, no pattern. Folks begged for mercy, prayed to God, but the sea didn't listen. So they turned to something else. The lantern keeper, old Elias Crow, made a deal. Went out in a skiff one night, lantern in hand, and called to whatever lives down there. Something older than the ocean, hungrier than the sharks. Offered it a tribute. One soul, every generation to keep the storms at bay. Daniel frowned, leaning in. A soul. Aye, the bartender said, his eyes distant. Someone young, strong, chosen by the village. They'd light the lantern, row 'em out past the pier, and let the sea take 'em. In return, the storm stopped. The fish came back. Been that way since 1692. Elias was the first keeper, kept the lantern burning, kept the pact alive. When he died, another took his place, then another. Always a keeper, always a light, always a debt. Last one was my niece, Leela, 20 years back. Tide took her, and the village stayed safe. But it's time again. Been too long, and the sea's getting restless. Daniel's stomach twisted. You're saying you still do this? Sacrifice people? The bartender's gaze hardened. We don't want to. We have to. You felt it, didn't you? That hum? It's the sea calling, reminding us what's due. Tonight's the night. The lantern's lit, the tide's high. Someone's going out there, willing or not. He turned away, busying himself with the glasses, and Daniel sat back, his mind reeling. A pact with the sea. A village living on borrowed time. It was insane, medieval, but the hum pulsed in his chest, undeniable, and he couldn't dismiss it. Outside, the sky darkened, the drizzle turning to a steady rain. Daniel paid his tab and headed to his truck, determined to leave before whatever ritual the bartender described began. But as he reached the lot, he saw it. The lantern tower ablaze, its light swinging through the storm, a beacon cutting the night. The hum grew louder, a song now, weaving through the rain, and he felt it pull at him, urging him closer. He shook his head, climbed into the truck, and turned the key. The engine roared, then died, choking on itself. He tried again, panic rising. Nothing. He was stranded in Wraithmere, and the tide was coming in. Chapter 4. The tide's claim. The rain pounded the truck's roof as Daniel sat in the driver's seat, his breath fogging the windshield. The lantern's light swept across the village, relentless, and the hum was a roar now, vibrating through the metal, through his bones. It was 9:47 p.m., the dashboard clock flickering, and the storm had returned with a vengeance, waves crashing against the pier like fists. He slammed his hands against the wheel, cursing his luck when he saw them, figures moving through the rain, cloaked in oilskins heading toward the pier. A dozen, maybe more, their faces hidden, their steps slow and deliberate. Daniel's heart thudded as he stepped out, the wind tearing at his coat. He followed at a distance, drawn by the hum, by the light, by something he couldn't name. The group gathered at the pier's end, the lantern's glow illuminating a small boat bobbing in the waves. In the center stood a young man, barely 20, pale and trembling, his wrists bound with rope. The villagers surrounded him, their voices rising in a chant, low and guttural, blending with the sea's song. Daniel ducked behind a crate, his pulse racing as the scene unfolded. The woman from earlier, the one with the broom, stepped forward, a knife in her hand. She cut the ropes, her face a mask of grief, and whispered something to the boy. He nodded, tears mixing with the rain, and climbed into the boat. The chant grew louder, the hum swelling, and the sea churned, waves rising higher, darker, as if eager for its prize. The villagers pushed the boat off, the lantern light following it as it drifted beyond the pier, swallowed by the storm. Daniel watched, frozen, as the boy's silhouette grew smaller, the boat rocking violently. Then the sea erupted. A shape, vast and impossible, broke the surface, its edges shimmering like oil, its form shifting between shadow and flesh. Tentacles, or something like them, coiled around the boat, pulling it under with a sound like a scream drowned in water. The lantern flared, blinding, and the hum stopped, leaving only the rain and the wind. The villagers turned, silent, and trudged back to the village, their duty done. Horror clawed at Daniel's throat, but before he could move, hands grabbed him, rough, unyielding. The bartender loomed over him, his scar stark in the lantern's glow. "You saw too much," he growled. "Should have left when you had the chance." They dragged him to the tavern, locking him in room 4, the hum returning faintly, a whisper now, mocking him. His truck wouldn't start, the storm wouldn't relent, and the sea knew he was there. Hours passed, the night stretching into an endless purgatory. At 3 a.m., the door creaked open, and the woman entered, her eyes red-rimmed. "It didn't take him," she said, her voice breaking. "The boy wasn't enough. It wants more, wants you." Daniel lunged for the door, but she was faster, slamming it shut, the lock clicking into place. The hum grew, the walls trembling, and he felt it. The sea's hunger, reaching for him through the floor, the air, the very fabric of Wraithmere. The window shattered, glass raining down, and the storm poured in. Shadows moved beyond the frame, tentacles, eyes, a maw of darkness, and Daniel screamed, his voice lost in the tide's roar. The room flooded, cold and black, and the last thing he saw was the lantern's light swinging wildly as the sea claimed its debt. Epilogue: The New Keeper. A month later, a woman named Sarah drove into Wraithmere, her car rattling from a long journey. The tavern welcomed her, the bartender sliding her a key. Room 4, freshly cleaned, the window repaired. She slept soundly, the hum a distant lullaby. On the cliff, the lantern tower glowed anew, tended by a figure in a soaked coat, his face hidden, his hands steady, as he kept the light burning. The village watched, silent, and the sea waited, patient as time itself, for the next debt to fall due. The bone clock's chime, a tale of time and terror. Chapter 1. The invitation, the road to Blackthorn Manor, was a scar through the wilderness, twisting through dense, ancient woods, where the trees seemed to lean inward, their branches clawing at the sky. Clara Whitmore's rental car rattled over the uneven dirt, its headlights slicing through the darkness of an autumn night in upstate New York. The dashboard clock blinked 10:52 p.m. Its glow a faint comfort against the oppressive gloom outside. She'd been driving for hours, her fingers cramped around the wheel, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The letter in her passenger seat, creased, handwritten, sealed with wax, had promised answers about her family's past, answers she'd been chasing since her mother's death 6 months ago. "Come to Blackthorn Manor," it read. "Your heritage awaits. No signature, no return address, just an invitation she couldn't ignore." Clara wasn't impulsive. At 32, she'd built a quiet life as a librarian in Albany, surrounded by books and routine. But the letter, delivered to her doorstep by an unseen hand, stirred something restless in her, a need to know why her mother had never spoken of Blackthorn, why her childhood was a tapestry of half-truths and silences. The manor wasn't on any map she could find, but the letter included directions, precise and cryptic, leading her deeper into the forest until the road ended at a wrought-iron gate, its bars twisted into shapes that resembled screaming faces. She stepped out, the air cold and sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. The gate was unlocked, swinging open with a groan that echoed through the trees. Beyond it, Blackthorn Manor loomed, a sprawling Gothic relic of stone and shadow, its towers jagged against the moonless sky. Ivy clung to its walls like veins, and the windows stared down, dark and unblinking. Clara hesitated, the letter heavy in her coat pocket, then drove through, the gate clanging shut behind her. The manor's courtyard was overgrown, choked with weeds and shattered statues, their faces eroded into featureless masks. She parked near the entrance, a massive oak door carved with intricate spirals, and knocked. The sound was swallowed by the silence, but moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a woman, tall, gaunt, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes were pale, almost translucent, and her smile was thin, practiced. "Miss Whitmore," she said, her voice soft as dust. "We've been expecting you. I'm Evelyn, the caretaker. Welcome to Blackthorn." Clara followed her inside, the air colder than the night outside, heavy with the smell of wax and old paper. The foyer was cavernous, its ceiling lost in shadows, its walls lined with portraits of stern, pale figures whose eyes seemed to follow her. A chandelier hung above, its crystals dull and cobwebbed, swaying faintly though no breeze stirred the room. Evelyn led her to a guest chamber on the second floor, a narrow room with a four-poster bed, a cracked mirror, and a single oil lamp flickering on a nightstand. "Rest," Evelyn said, handing her a brass key. "But don't wander after midnight. The manor listens." Clara frowned at the warning, but exhaustion dulled her curiosity. She locked the door, set the letter on the nightstand, and collapsed onto the bed. As sleep crept in, she heard it, a faint, rhythmic ticking, like a metronome buried in the walls. It was steady, deliberate, and with it came a whisper, so soft she might have dreamed it. Tick, tock, time runs thin. She sat up, heart thudding, but the room was empty, the lamp's flame steady. Just the house settling, she told herself, lying back down. Just the house. But the ticking followed her into sleep, weaving through her dreams like a thread pulling tight. Chapter 2. The first night. Clara's dreams were a labyrinth of shadows, corridors that twisted endlessly, doors that led nowhere, and a ticking that grew louder, sharper, until it was a hammer striking bone. She saw faces in the dark, pale and eyeless, their mouths moving in silent pleas. She ran, her footsteps muffled, her breath fogging in air that smelled of frost and blood. But the ticking pursued her, relentless, counting down to something she couldn't see. She woke, gasping, her nightgown clinging to her skin, the room bathed in the lamp's sickly glow. The clock on the nightstand, a heavy brass thing she hadn't noticed before, showed 3:07 a.m., its hands twitching as if unsure of their purpose. The ticking was louder now, not a dream but a presence, pulsing through the walls, the floor, the air itself. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive, irregular, like a heartbeat struggling to keep rhythm. Clara slid out of bed, her bare feet cold against the warped floorboards, and pressed her ear to the wall. The sound was clearer there, accompanied by that whisper again. Tick, tock. Choose or be chosen. Her pulse raced as she scanned the room. The mirror reflected only her pale face. Her dark hair tangled, but the shadows behind her seemed to shift, pooling in corners where the light didn't reach. She grabbed the lamp, its handle hot against her palm, and crept to the door. Evelyn's warning echoed, "Don't wander after midnight." But the ticking was a hook in her mind, pulling her forward. She unlocked the door, the click swallowed by the manor's silence, and stepped into the hallway. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, its walls lined with more portraits, their subjects watching with painted, unblinking eyes. The air was colder here, thick with the scent of decay, and the ticking grew louder, guiding her like a siren's call. She followed it, her lamp casting long, wavering shadows that danced like specters. Doors lined the hall, each carved with the same spirals as the entrance, and she passed them, afraid to touch their handles. The manor felt alive, its walls breathing, its floors creaking as if shifting under her weight. At the end of the hall, a staircase spiraled downward, its steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The ticking was deafening now, a cacophony that vibrated in her chest, and she descended, the lamp trembling in her grip. The stairs led to a vast chamber, its ceiling vaulted and lost in darkness, its walls lined with shelves of dusty tomes and glass cases filled with strange artifacts, bones, clocks, vials of dark liquid. In the center stood the source of the sound, a towering clock, its frame carved from pale, polished bone, its face a mosaic of teeth and ivory. Its hands were black, jagged, and they moved erratically, jerking forward, then back, as if time itself was breaking. Clara approached, mesmerized, the whisper now a chorus. Tick, tock, pay the price. The clock's pendulum swung, a heavy, glistening thing that looked disturbingly like a human spine. And with each swing the air grew colder, the shadows thicker. She reached out, her fingers brushing the bone frame, and the ticking stopped. Silence crashed over her, heavy and suffocating, and the lamp flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. Something moved behind her, a rustle, a breath, and she spun, her heart in her throat, but saw nothing. The ticking resumed, slower now, deliberate, and the lamp flared back to life. She ran, the stairs endless, the portraits jeering as she passed. Back in her room, she locked the door, her breath ragged, and sank to the floor. The ticking followed, softer but unyielding, and she knew it wasn't just a clock. It was something else, something that had seen her, something that wanted her. Chapter 3. The Manor's Truth. Morning arrived, gray and thin, Manor's windows filtering light into a sickly haze. Clara barely slept, the ticking a constant companion, weaving through her thoughts like a parasite. She dressed mechanically, her hands shaking, and headed downstairs, determined to confront Evelyn. The foyer was empty, the chandelier still swaying faintly, and she found the caretaker in the dining hall, setting out a breakfast of cold porridge and weak tea. Evelyn's eyes flicked to her, sharp and knowing, as if she'd expected Clara's questions. "What's in the basement?" Clara demanded, her voice trembling but firm. "That clock, what is it?" Evelyn's smile was a blade, thin and cold. "You went wandering, didn't you? I told you to stay put." She set a bowl down with a deliberate clink, her movements precise. "The bone clock's been here longer than the manor, longer than the Whitmores. Your family built this place around it, to keep it safe, and to keep it fed." "Fed?" Clara's stomach churned, the ticking louder now, echoing in her skull. Evelyn sat, folding her hands like a priestess at prayer. "Your ancestors weren't just landowners. They were keepers, guardians of a bargain struck centuries ago. The clock doesn't measure time. It demands it. Every generation it chooses one of yours, a Whitmore, to pay its price. Blood for time, time for peace. If it's not fed, it takes what it wants, And it doesn't stop at 1. Your mother knew. She ran, thought she could escape it. But the clock always finds its own. Clara's knees weakened and she gripped the table. You're saying my family sacrifices people to a clock? Not just people, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Kin. The clock prefers blood tied to its making. Your great-uncle was the last 30 years ago. It's been quiet since, but it's waking now. You felt it, didn't you? It called you here, same as it called the others. She stood, her shadow long across the floor. Stay till tonight. You'll see. Clara stumbled outside, the air sharp with frost, the manor's walls closing in behind her. The forest surrounded her, impenetrable, and when she tried her car, the engine was dead, the battery cold as stone. She was trapped, tethered to Blackthorn by a ticking she couldn't escape. The manor's other occupants, silent figures she'd glimpsed in the halls, watched her from windows, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. They were keepers too, she realized, bound to the same cycle, waiting for the clock to choose. By afternoon, she couldn't sit still. She explored the manor, avoiding the basement but searching for answers. In a dusty library, she found journals, Whitmore journals, detailing the clock's history. 1697. The clock wakes, demands its due. We offer Thomas, and it sleeps. 1724. It took Mary in the night, unchosen. We cannot delay again. 1892. The clock spares none who refuse. Each entry was a litany of loss, a family bleeding itself dry to appease a thing they didn't understand. Clara's hands trembled as she read, the ticking growing louder, the whispers clearer. Tick, tock, your time is near. Chapter 4. The Chimes Demand. Dusk painted the manor in shades of bruise, the ticking now a drumbeat shaking the walls. Clara stood in her room, the letter crumpled in her fist, its words a trap she'd walked into blindly. Evelyn had vanished, the other keepers silent, and the manor felt emptier, hungrier. At 11 p.m., a bell tolled, deep, resonant, coming from the basement. The ticking stopped, replaced by a hum, low and guttural, that pulled at Clara's bones. She knew what it meant. The clock was calling. She didn't want to go, but her feet moved, drawn by a force she couldn't resist. The basement door was open, the stairs descending into blackness, and she followed, the lamp in her hand trembling. The bone clock loomed larger now, its frame pulsing faintly, its teeth glinting like wet bone. The pendulum swung faster, the spine-like weight dripping with something dark and viscous. Shadows gathered around it, tall and thin, their edges dissolving into the air, their faces voids that whispered her name. Clara Whitmore, they hissed, their voices a chorus of rot. Pay the price, or we take all. She backed away, her lamp flickering, but the shadows surged, their coldness seeping into her skin. She saw them now, her family, or what was left of them, their forms twisted, trapped in the clock's orbit. Her mother was there, eyeless, her mouth open in a silent scream. Clara stumbled, her lamp crashing to the floor, and the shadows closed in, their whispers deafening. Tick, tock, choose. She screamed, a raw, desperate sound, and ran, the stairs endless, the manor shifting around her. Doors slammed shut, windows cracked, and the ticking returned, faster, angrier. She reached the foyer, the chandelier crashing behind her, and threw open the front door. The forest was a wall of darkness, but she didn't care. She ran, branches tearing at her, the ticking chases her like a predator. The manor's lights flickered, then died, and she heard it. 1 final chime, a sound like bone snapping echoing through the night. The forest swallowed her screams, and Blackthorn Manor fell silent. Clara was gone, her car empty, the letter fluttering in the wind. The clock's hands stilled, its hunger sated. For now. Epilogue. The new guest. 3 months later, a man named Julian arrived at Blackthorn Manor, a letter in his pocket, his eyes bright with curiosity. Evelyn greeted him, her smile thin, and led him to a guest chamber, Clara's room, freshly made, the clock on the nightstand ticking softly. He slept soundly, unaware of the shadows gathering below, the bone clock counting down to its next chime. The manor waited, patient as death, for the Whitmore line to pay again. The Mirror Vale, a tale of reflections and ruin. Chapter 1, The Carnival's Call. The highway stretched endless and black under a starless Nebraska sky, its edges fraying into fields of dead corn that whispered in the October wind. Sophie Keller's van coughed along the asphalt, its engine rattling like a dying lung. The dashboard clock flickered 11:19 p.m., its numbers dim and unsteady, and the radio spat static, unable to hold a signal. She'd been driving for hours, her eyes gritty with fatigue, her hands tight on the wheel. A freelance photographer, Sophie chased stories across the Midwest. Abandoned towns, forgotten landmarks, anything with a pulse of mystery. Tonight, she was bound for nowhere, just running from a string of bad gigs and worse memories when a faded billboard loomed into her headlights. Ravenshade Carnival, one night only. Next exit. She hadn't planned to stop. Carnivals weren't her thing, too loud, too garish, but the van's gas gauge hovered near empty, and her phone was a useless brick, its battery drained. The billboard's promise of lights and life felt like a lifeline in the desolate night. She took the exit, the road narrowing into a gravel path that twisted through the cornfields, the stalks closing in like silent sentinels. 10 minutes later, the carnival emerged, a riot of color and sound, its tents and rides glowing against the dark. A Ferris wheel spinning lazily under strings of flickering bulbs. Sophie parked in a muddy lot beside rusted cars and horse trailers, the air thick with the smell of popcorn, grease and something sharper, like ozone before a storm. Laughter and music spilled from the carnival, but it felt wrong, hollow, like a recording played on a loop. She grabbed her camera, a battered Nikon she'd carried since college, and stepped into the crowd. The carnival was alive, yet oddly sparse. Families with blank smiles, workers in striped vests moving with mechanical precision, their eyes avoiding hers. A sign at the entrance read Ravenshade Carnival, established 1873. Leave your cares behind. Her stomach growled, and she followed the scent of food to a stall selling candied apples, their surfaces unnaturally glossy like glass. The vendor, a wiry man with a crooked grin and ink-stained hands, handed her one without asking. "First night's free," he said, his voice slick as oil. "Stick around for the Hall of Wonders. It's unforgettable." Sophie nodded, uneasy, and bit into the apple. It was too sweet, cloying, and she spat it out when he turned away. The crowd pressed closer, their faces pale under the lights, and she felt watched, not by eyes but by something deeper, something that saw inside her. Needing a break, she found the ticket booth, a gaudy box painted with stars and crescent moons. A woman sat inside, old, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp as glass. "Room for the night?" Sophie asked, hoping for a nearby motel. The woman's lips curled, not quite a smile. No motels here, dear, but we've got a trailer for strays. Number 12, edge of the lot. Sleep tight, and don't look in the mirrors after dark." She slid a key across, its edges jagged, and Sophie frowned at the strange warning, but took it. The trailer was a dented metal box, its interior cramped and stale, with a cot, a sink, and a cracked mirror bolted to the wall, its surface streaked with grime. She covered it with a towel, the woman's words nagging at her, and collapsed onto the cot. As sleep pulled her under, she heard it, a faint hum, like glass vibrating, coming from the walls. It was soft, almost soothing, but it carried a whisper. "Look, see, stay." She stirred, heart quickening, but the sound faded, and she told herself it was just the carnival's din, nothing more. Chapter 2. The Hole of Wonders. Sleep came in fragments, splintered by dreams of mirrors endless, gleaming, reflecting not her face, but others, strangers with hollow eyes and mouths frozen in screams. She ran through a maze of glass, her hands bloody from pounding on surfaces that wouldn't break. The hum growing louder, a chorus that sang her name. She woke, gasping, the trailer dark, the air heavy with that ozone tang. The clock on her phone was dead, but the carnival's lights bled through the trailer's window, painting the walls in sickly hues. She checked her watch. 3:22 a.m., the second hand twitching erratically. The hum was real now, not a dream, pulsing faintly from the direction of the carnival. Sophie sat up, her camera strap tangled around her wrist, and listened. It wasn't music, wasn't machinery. It was alive, a vibration that crawled under her skin, urging her to move. The ticket woman's warning echoed, "Don't look in the mirrors." But curiosity burned brighter than fear. She grabbed her camera, slipped on her boots, and stepped outside, the gravel crunching underfoot. The carnival was quieter now, its rides still, its lights dimmed, but the hum drew her forward, a thread pulling tight. The crowd was gone, the stalls shuttered, yet the carnival felt fuller, as if unseen things lingered in the shadows. She followed the hum to a tent at the carnival's heart, its canvas black and stitched with silver thread that shimmered like veins. A sign above the entrance read, "Hole of Wonders. Enter if you dare." The flap was open, swaying slightly, and Sophie hesitated, her breath fogging in the cold. The hum was louder here, almost a voice whispering, "Look, see, no." She lifted her camera, a shield against the unknown, and stepped inside. The tent was vast, impossibly so, its ceiling lost in darkness, its walls lined with mirrors of every shape, ornate, cracked, fogged, some so old their silver backing peeled like skin. The hum came from everywhere, vibrating through the floor, and Sophie's reflection flickered in the glass, distorted, her eyes too large, her mouth too wide. She snapped a photo, the flash blinding, and the hum spiked, a shriek that made her stagger. The mirrors trembled, their surfaces rippling like water, and she saw them, shapes behind the glass, tall and thin, their edges blurring, their faces voids that pulsed with hunger. She backed away, her camera dangling, and tripped over a velvet rope. The shapes pressed closer, their whispers clear now. "Look, stay, give." Sophie ran, the tent's exit impossibly far, the mirrors multiplying around her. She burst outside, the night air sharp in her lungs, and stumbled back to the trailer, locking the door behind her. The hum followed, softer but relentless, and she tore the towel from the mirror. Her reflection stared back, normal at first, then shifted, Her eyes darkened, her skin paled, and something moved behind her, a shadow that wasn't hers. She covered the mirror again, her hands shaking, and curled up on the cot, the hum a lullaby she couldn't escape. Chapter 3. The carnival's secret dawn broke gray and thin, the carnival's lights extinguished, its tents sagging like tired beasts. Sophie hadn't slept, the hum a constant drone, weaving through her thoughts. She dressed quickly, her camera heavy around her neck, and headed out, determined to find answers. The ticket woman was at her booth, knitting now, her needles clicking like bones. Sophie approached, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "What's in the Halls of Wonders? Those mirrors, what are they?" The woman's eyes flicked up, sharp and cold. "You looked, didn't you? Foolish girl." She set her knitting down, her hands folding like a trap. "The mirrors aren't just glass. They're doors, windows to somewhere else. Somewhere that's been hungry since before this carnival was born. Ravenshade's been carrying them for centuries, town to town, feeding them to keep them quiet." Feeding them? Sophie's mouth went dry, the hum louder now, pulsing in her chest. "Memories," the woman said, her voice a hiss. "The mirrors take what you've lived, your joys, your pains, your secrets, and they keep it, hoard it like gold. In return, they let us pass, let the carnival move on. But they're greedy. Sometimes they want more than memories. Sometimes they want you." She leaned closer, her breath sour. "You saw them, didn't you? The ones inside. They've marked you now." Sophie's knees buckled, and she gripped the booth's edge. "You're saying they trap people, and you just let it happen?" "We don't let it," the woman snapped. "We survive it. Every stop, someone looks too long, gives too much. Last time it was a boy, thought he could outsmart them. They took him, left his body empty, wandering the midway till he dropped. You're the one they want now. Your memories are fresh, strong. Leave before dusk, or you're theirs." Sophie stumbled away, the carnival waking around her, its workers moving with that same mechanical grace. She checked her van. Dead battery, the engine silent despite her frantic attempts. The hum grew, a siren's call, and she saw them, carnival folk watching her, their faces blank, their eyes too bright. She ran to the Hall of Wonders, desperate for proof, her camera clicking as she photographed the mirrors. The flashes angered them, the glass rippling, the shapes lunging closer, their whispers a roar. "Give! Stay! Ours!" Back at the trailer, she found a journal under the cot, pages of cramped writing, names, dates, towns. 1894. Clara, lost to the veil. Took her laugh first, then her face. 1927. Amos, gone after 3 nights. Mirrors kept his screams. 1978. Lily, my sister, stared too long. I see her in the glass sometimes. It was a ledger of the lost, the carnival's price for survival, and Sophie's name was scrawled at the bottom. Fresh ink, still wet. She dropped it, her heart pounding, and knew she had to leave. Now. Chapter 4. The Veil's Hunger. The carnival blazed at dusk, its lights a fevered glow, the hum now a scream vibrating through the tents. Sophie packed her camera, her wallet, anything she could carry, and ran for the exit, the crowd parting around her like water around a stone. The ticket woman stood at the gate, her knitting abandoned, her eyes pitying. "You can't outrun them," she said. "They've tasted you." Sophie ignored her, sprinting into the cornfields, the hum chasing her, the mirror's whispers in her ears. "Look. Give. Stay." She tripped, her camera smashing against a rock, and the field seemed to shift, the stalks closing in, guiding her back to the carnival. The Hall of Wonders loomed ahead, its flap open, the mirrors gleaming inside. She stumbled in, unable to stop, and the tent sealed behind her, the air cold as glass. The mirrors surrounded her, their surfaces alive, reflecting not her but pieces of her childhood dog, her mother's funeral, her first kiss, each memory torn away, leaving holes in her mind. The shapes emerged, tall and hungry, their voids of faces pulsing, their hands, not hands but shards of light, reaching through the glass. She screamed, her voice fracturing, and the mirrors drank it, her reflection fading, her body heavy, sluggish. She clawed at the tent, her nails tearing canvas, and burst outside, the carnival silent, its lights dead. The crowd was gone, the stalls empty, but the hum remained, a heartbeat in the earth. She ran to the trailer, the mirror uncovered now, her reflection gone, replaced by a void that whispered her name. The shapes poured through, their coldness wrapping her, pulling her memories, her name, her pain, her everything, until she was hollow, a shell stumbling through the midway. The carnival vanished at dawn, its tents gone, the field empty save for Sophie's van, its keys in the ignition. Her camera lay in the dirt, its last photo a blur of glass and shadow, her face half eaten by light. The mirrors had fed, and Ravenshade was free to move on. Epilogue, the next stop. Weeks later, a man named Ethan pulled into a Kansas field, drawn by a billboard for Ravenshade Carnival. The ticket woman greeted him, her smile sharp, and handed him a key to Trailer 12. He slept soundly, the hum a distant song, unaware of the mirror watching from the wall, its surface clean, hungry, waiting for his gaze. The carnival spun on, its lights bright, its veil unbroken. Unfortunately, all the stories are over for today, so I hope you're all asleep by now. In the next video, I'll tell you new stories again, so don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss all the latest stories. See you in the next story, but for now, those who haven't fallen asleep yet, listen to the beautiful sounds of rain.